Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next guest is truly one of the great actresses of her generation. After winning an Academy Award at the age of 11, Anna Paquin delivered wonderful performance after wonderful performance in films like The 25th Hour, Margaret, X-Men, Squid and the Whale, True Blood, and now her new show on WGN, Bellevue, where she plays a police detective dealing with the disappearance of a transgender teenager. Before we get started, I want to remind our audiences at home they can submit questions using the Submit a Question button right next to the video they're watching. For now, let's take a quick look at the trailer for Bellevue starring Anna Paquin.
Bellevue is a small mining community. Everything seems very nice and glossy on the outside. But it's actually a lot more sinister under the surface.
Bellevue is a small-town mystery about the disappearance of a young teenager, and it's driven by a young female cop.
Action.
Annie is very strong. She is very flawed, and she has consequently had a relatively reckless life, but it has also made her a very, very good cop.
Hey, you can't do this.
What did you say about Jesse?
I could help. That's it.
Lying. Over the course of these 8 episodes, it gets messy in very creatively exciting ways.
All right, listen up. Found a jean jacket, a cell, and a bike. All confirmed by Maggie Sweetland to belong to her 16-year-old son, Jesse. Rumor has it he's contemplating his gender identity.
It's about her sort of desperate, intensive search to find out what happened to this kid.
As that case unravels, so does Annie's own life as some of her past comes out to haunt her.
I can't follow you if you get in over your head anymore.
This is a psychological mystery thriller, and the complexity of it is really shocking and exciting.
You know I'd kill anyone if they hurt you, right?
Jail could be good for you.
Well, if I go down, I'm taking you down with me. Annie's family is ultimately the most important thing to her.
I will love you to the day I die, but I do not want my daughter to end up like you.
Eddie is Annie's ex-partner. The idea is they're high school sweethearts that then never got the chance to do anything else.
With Eddie, she's quite combative, but it's complicated.
Oh, come on, just open the door.
It's real life. It doesn't all fit into a tidy little package.
From the get-go, we were interested in exploring what it's like to be different in a small town.
We have this transgender teen that our story focuses on, and there's a lot of intolerance that comes up very quickly.
What the hell, man? I'm still me.
Remember those riddles I got when I was young?
Of course I do. They messed you up really bad.
There's a mystery person from her past that sort of resurfaces.
Annie starts receiving anonymous little notes and riddles and letters from somebody, and it all brings the various secrets and pain and weird stuff that happened in the past back up to the foreground.
Hello, little light.
It's a compelling, smart, really fantastic series.
It's a really, really, really interesting and addictive story.
It's very psychological. There's so many layers, and you never know what's going to happen next.
Everything that we go through day to day is there, but it's much more intense.
What did you do with my kid? Don't go there. Why did you go there? I thought that you needed somebody.
Breathe you in. Oh, I love that taste.
I need to find him.
Everybody, please welcome the great Anna Paquin. Let's hear it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations on this show. You're not only the star, you're a producer of it as well.
Yes, I am.
So how did this come to you? When did it first come to you, and when did you decide that you wanted to produce it as well as star in it?
Well, I read the script that Jane Maggs, the extraordinary writer who you just got to hear speak, had written. And then as it happens, Adrienne Mitchell, who was the sort of co-creator, executive producer, director on it, happened to be in my neighborhood the next day. And I was like, well, I need to meet these people because I love this. And we sat down and spoke for like 3 hours. And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm in. And it was just one of those things where I didn't want it in a little bit. I wanted it in all the way, which is kind of what, you know, being part of the producing team is about.
Kind of being a protector.
Yes, it's being, and our little sort of coven, as we called it, it was the three-mommed baby. We were sort of very sort of collaboratively and creatively linked, and just sort of, it just was one of those creative marriages that worked like immediately.
When you read a script and then you meet with the creators and you have a 3-hour conversation, what does that conversation consist of? What are you looking to hear from them?
Well, I mean, it's making sure that the thing that you saw on the page that you responded to is the thing that they are intending to do with it. And that, because you can interpret, I mean, come on, people interpret literature or plays or things on the written word in so many different ways. You want to make sure that it wasn't just sort of an accident. And then, you start getting into more and more specifics and more details, and suddenly you're like, oh, I need to go home and feed my kids. I've been sitting here for 3 hours, but I guess we're doing this, Right.
And they have answers to questions
Yes,
that I have
and-
about
yeah,
the character, and they
and
can talk about the character,
absolutely,
and they're
absolutely.
thinking beyond the surface.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is clearly something that the show does.
Yes.
What did you like about this character?
One of the things that I find to be compelling in any drama that I watch is a flawed protagonist. And I think that for the most part, that is more common in male protagonists. Usually women have to either be all good or all bad, or if they are doing things that are morally in any way not perfect, get sort of punished for it, as opposed to just getting to be people who have flawed lives and sometimes make good choices and sometimes make bad choices, and that's just humanity. So the fact that this was written sort of as an interesting character first, who then happened to be female second, was very compelling to me, because so many times I read scripts, I'm like, this is amazing if I was the dude. Yeah.
And you're so right about female characters being flawed, because there was that period of time where it felt like indie film and TV wanted to have like really flawed women, but they were also just shitty people. Whereas you didn't have good people who are
And look,
also
I do
flawed.
believe that is changing, and there's amazing female protagonists, largely on television and the streaming platforms now. But I just sort of mean, like, as a general, like, in the last 27 years of doing this, things that I have grown to sort of become tired of, both as an audience member and as a female performer. That women why don't we get to be imperfect, but also somehow relatable, or someone that you're going to root for? It's like Annie's a basket case, but she's quite a lovable basket case as well. You look at other shows like that have I mean, Dexter's about a serial killer. You love him anyway. Bryan Cranston in Breaking Bad is a meth dealer. You love him anyway. Well, right until the end when he gets kind of shady. But do you know what I mean? Like, you don't really, having those kinds of characters getting to be female, I still think is something that, is changing, but is changing, a little slowly. And so material like this is incredibly appealing to me.
Do you feel like you got that a little bit with True Blood, that True Blood was kind of ahead of its time in the character that Ellen Ball created for you?
Well, True Blood was amazing in a lot of ways, and I got to do a lot of really extraordinary stuff, but ultimately she was a damsel in distress.
Yeah.
And that is the structure of that show. And also, in order for there to be season after season of a fantasy sci-fi sort of show of that variety, she needs to keep making mistakes that are quite similar. Because one could argue that, like, the season that Eric Northman gives Sookie $10,000, she should have left Bon Ton, moved to somewhere where, like, it's really quiet, and just not had anything to do with it anymore. But then there's no show, you know what I'm saying? So the drama in in that kind of genre exists around people not necessarily making bright choices all the time. And also, apparently the cute little blonde girl being rescued by really sexy, hot dudes all the time makes for good television.
There's still lots of people who want that. And
you know what I'm saying? And by the way,
yeah.
I completely love everything that show was, but it is not the same thing as what this does, as far as, Annie's kind of rescue your own damn self kind of woman, as opposed to getting herself into trouble and then really and truly needing, like, a literal supernatural creature to come and save her.
On the producing side, after you go from, did they have the whole thing written or just the pilot?
So there was the first, I think, 4 episodes. I may be making that up, may have only been 3. There were outlines for all of them. But as as we got there and as we were starting to shoot, the story and the relationships and who kind of what the dynamics as they played out on screen did change some of the plot as we were planning to have it unfold, and did change some of the ways that we were planning to tell the story. So even though the broad strokes were basically the same, it was kind of a living, breathing entity that was sort of that was organically developing as we were shooting to a certain extent.
Did you feel like you were taking part in that as well and working with the team?
Yeah, absolutely. And that we were all kind of very much, oh, well, this seems to be really working well. You know, the dynamic between, you know, mine and Sean Doyle's character, Chief Peter, you know, like worked really, really well. So there was more stuff written for our characters, and you know, the plot line with Eddie, his ex/baby daddy, you know, was equally interesting to the cop stuff. So that sort of ended up with there be, you know, things like that where more emphasis ends up getting put where real sort of creative spark happens on camera.
Now you said coming from True Blood and going into this, you're talking about what you're looking for in a character, specifically a female character. Do you basically convey that to your team? Like, I don't want to play these types of people anymore, so don't send that to me. Send me the strong women, please.
Well, no. Suki was a strong woman. She was just a strong woman in a genre that has a very specific need for there to be like
Mechanics.
a rescue scenario almost every single episode, and you know, which is fun, and also, you know, she was cute and blonde, and who doesn't want to watch that, you know?
I think you're referring to somebody else here as cute and blonde.
Yes, look at me. That was a fun period of my life where I got to pretend to be that person. And now I'm kind of back to being, you know, my slightly more dark and twisty self. Sorry, your original question. Yes, no, in general, my people, if you like, sort of know what kind of stuff is going to interest me or not. They know, you know, I've been with the same people for years and years and years and years and years. And they generally know what will or will not interest me. Sometimes it will be like, okay, you might kind of have a weird knee-jerk reaction to blah, but give it a chance, you know. Right. But, you know, I respond to good writing, and I respond to sort of creative teams of people that are inspiring to me or whose work I already loved, or
you started with the best in your career.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been extraordinarily privileged to.
With Jane Campion is the absolute best to start.
I mean, it doesn't get much better, although I've worked with some extraordinary directors that, like, it almost feels like insulting to them to be like, oh, no, that's the best. I'm like, well, there's kind of like a sort of top 1% that I've managed to play in that pool of, and I'm incredibly lucky because that's how I learned to act, was being directed by the best directors you could possibly ever hope to work with, even maybe once in your career, let alone over and over again.
What's interesting, though, about the best directors is they also have access to the best scripts a lot of the times, which
of course.
A lot of directors would say are easier to direct because it's all in the writing and the intentions are there. So did you ever have an instance where you had to sort of work your way around a script that maybe wasn't as well sort of organized as these things that the great directors were behind?
Yes, absolutely.
And how was that? Like, how did you go from acting with these great directors and these great scripts to those?
You walk into a situation knowing the strengths and weaknesses of an individual project, knowing where the challenges are going to be. If you know that if you're working with a certain kind of director and it's a certain kind of script, that the odds are there's not going to be like, oh, that doesn't really make any sense conversations on the day. Right. And we only figured that out when we got to set. But, you know, but that's not a bad thing either, because that also breeds a kind of creative nimbleness of being able to sort of problem solve with limited resources and limited time and sometimes less experienced people. And you can sometimes create magic like that, you know? And that's also what's exciting about working with people who aren't hugely experienced, but have natural talent and passion and that hunger to figure it out, you know, and there's no complacency there. So, I mean, I think sort of from sort of every end of the continuum, it's always something I personally really love doing.
Another project that you're in that just came out last year, the wonderful series on Netflix, Alias Grace.
Thank you.
Directed by Mary Herron,
Herron.
all of it, who I actually just rewatched American Psycho the other day. She's so fantastic.
She's awesome.
Yeah, she's really cool.
Yeah.
And written entirely by Sarah
Sarah
Polley,
Polley.
also really cool
Yes.
as well. What was it like getting on board that? Was that just like an immediate like, oh, Mary, Sarah, let's go?
Yeah, basically. It was like, Mary, Atwood, Holly, yeah. I mean, that was the kind of no-brainer.
And your character is kind of vicious.
I think Nancy is deeply misunderstood.
Yes. In what way?
I mean, if you want to, like, I mean, I'm being slightly flippant, but as far as the freedoms not afforded to women of a certain socioeconomic, sort of level at that time, especially if they had had previous indiscretions or pregnancies or whatever, their options were limited. It was kind of like either somebody marries you or you're probably going to end up selling your body on the street. She is not a woman who has any options. She finds herself in a sort of vaguely, almost blissful domestic situation that's also quite emotionally abusive with her, boss/lover, and she winds up pregnant. And she has there is nothing she can do to actually get herself out of that situation, short of, what, they would sort of refer to as mercifully the child not making it, which is what happened apparently with her previous child. So while she is on the surface quite vicious towards Grace, it does come out of a place of like real desperation.
Limited resource.
Yes.
Right? What's mine is mine, and nobody's going to take that from me.
And she's, in the same breath as that she actually really does want company, is also terrified of what that means once she realizes that she's could be kicked out as soon as he finds out she's pregnant.
Such a cool project. I mean, it's my favorite adaptation of Atwood as of recently.
Ooh.
Sorry, guys. Sorry, everybody.
I mean, look, I've got to be loyal to the team, but come on, Handmaid's Tale?
I liked Alias Grace a little more.
High five, thank you.
Yeah. Another project, and I brought this up in the green room, and as long as I'm interviewing people and as long as I get to interview you, I will bring this movie up with you because I will champion it forever. I think the fact that it wasn't released for 5 years is completely insane, and you should have won every award on the book when it
was actually 7 years.
7 years, 7 fucking years. It's unbelievable to me. It's a movie called Margaret, written and directed by
Kenneth Lonergan.
the boss Kenneth Lonergan.
Yes.
Talk to me about. Were you able to watch it when it came out? When it finally came out 7 years later, did you go see it?
Well, I mean, I didn't go see it. I went to a screening and we had a Q&A, and at the time I was a little pregnant with some twins. So, like, life had sort of moved on pretty substantially since I was 23 and we shot it.
But what was it like watching it in that moment?
Well, I'd seen various cuts of it along the way because if anyone feels like jumping down a Google rabbit hole, they can find out themselves exactly how and why that movie had such a sort of strange journey from inception to screen. So it wasn't.
What's interesting about that story is that story keeps being revealed slightly because when the movie was released, Lonergan was like, I can't talk about this too much.
I mean, I think I'm allowed to say so now, but I think everyone was in the middle of lawsuits.
That's what I mean.
So no one was allowed to. There's more information out there now, but I feel like it's not my.
No. I'm not.
It's not my legal issue to.
I'm not pressing you about it.
Yes.
I just thought it was. I still think it's interesting that even years later, I hear stuff and I'm like, oh, that's what happened with that thing.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I met Kenny when I was doing a production of This Is Our Youth in London, and Kenny, being the strange, curmudgeonly genius that he is, like later sort of told me, well, it was always your part, but he still made me audition like 800 times before he cast me. And
Margaret, or this is
for Margaret. I was like, well, you didn't tell me that, but thanks. And then by the time, and it was also one of those ones that took a very long time to actually get made. So by the time we were shooting it, I was 23, and then he was all like, oh, I'm not sure if you can still play a teenager. And I was like, well, okay, I mean, I think so, but, so we kind of fudged that one a little bit. Luckily, I kind of looked like I was 15 until I was about 25, so that kind of works in my favor. So it was all kind of a very long, strange process, but ultimately one of the most creatively rewarding ones I've ever had, and working, sort of in sort of the, like, the mind meld between Kenny and I was sort of like bizarrely perfect, and I feel like at some point we'll get a redo on that one.
I really hope so. I mean, those extended scenes, or those extensive scenes between dialogue scenes between you and Ruffalo and you and Jeannie Berlin, and the
Kenny
thing
writes
about being strident.
that simultaneous dialogue thing that he does like literally nobody, I think, ever. And it's not an accident. Literally every single time there is somebody speaking over somebody else, it is choreographed down to like the piece of punctuation that is used, which means that you also need to have a certain kind of actor to make it work. And he has sort of up his sleeve a lot of people who, like myself, really love the words. And find that exciting.
What does an actor have to do to make that work? Like, what is the thing? Just sort of knowing how to time it and remembering the timing?
Well, it's not just that. It's that you're actually answering it's like when you're having an actual argument with somebody, and you are actually answering the thing that they're saying, but then starting your next thought, not necessarily waiting for them to answer you. And it's to write that, it's very, very challenging, but really fun as an actor to get to then play with.
I can't imagine how much fun.
Like some of those the scenes in the classroom where they're having political debates it was just fun. It's like,
Yeah. I love that movie. You have another project that I want to bring up really fast, that you just produced a film that your husband directed.
Yes, called The Parting Glass.
Yeah, talk to me about this.
It's written by our wonderful friend and actor and writer, Dennis O'Hare. It's about a family coming together in the wake of one sibling's suicide over this very kind of strange, darkly funny, sort of beautiful, odd, basically kind of car trip, figuring out sort of like trying to get the bits and pieces of what exactly happened and the sort of strange family dynamics and all the regression that happens when adult siblings suddenly are thrown back into the into like basically literally the back of the station wagon again. Ed Asner plays the sort of the patriarch. Cynthia Nixon's in it. Melissa Leo's in it. Reese Fans is in it.
I
play the sister that died actually, but it was it's a beautiful labor of love.
Do you have scenes, or are you just photographs?
No. There's flashbacks, because we see that character as she is remembered by the different siblings in sort of different stages, as they're sort of trying to put together what happened and what led to, and what, as I think those sorts of tragedies obviously do lead to, there's people get left with a lot of questions.
What was it like being directed by your husband?
Well, I had been several times, because he used to direct True Blood. He did the season premiere 3 or 4 times.
Still, I think it's a different beast to be directing a TV show that has sort of a built-in apparatus and a TV and a movie.
Yeah, but he and I have such a shorthand that it's just it's so easy. Plus, when people are like, "Oh, was it hard to be directed by him?" Like, my husband shot a sex scene that I had with Joe Manganiello one season on True Blood. I don't think it gets weirder than that. Because it was the premiere that year, yeah. and Sookie and Alcide were having a thing. So, I
normally wouldn't go there with an interview, but you brought it up.
I'm just saying, is it weird being directed by your husband? I'm like, after that, nothing's weird.
What was the conversation with him going into that?
Well, True Blood was kind of like musical partners.
I mean, can you even have a conversation going into that? It's like, this is what we're doing, so be okay, be good with it.
Absolutely. Also, it was just kind of, it goes from it being like, oh, this is kind of funny, although everyone on the crew has seen every single actor butt-ass naked. So it's not like, you know what I mean? This was season 7, I think. So, there was no more, there were no boundaries left on that front. But then, ultimately it comes into, actually, no, that angle's kind of funny. Joe, can you put your hand here? No, can you do he's a film and camera geek. It was just it's
You guys
about
I mean, people forget that you're also doing a job. So as
Yeah.
uncomfortable it is, there is like an objective and thing that you have to finish
it's
that day.
ultimately choreography.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so, but there was some weird stuff like that on True Blood. But I'm just like, yeah, we can do a little nice indie movie where he directs me up in the freezing cold in Canada. For you know what I mean? I'm like, we've covered weird.
Let's get some questions from our audience. Who has a question? Right here.
Hi, Anna.
Hi.
Your husband and yourself, you're working together, you're raising twins. How do you separate work-life balance? And what does it look like when you get home? And
I mean, honestly, there isn't really a separation of work and life because, I mean, in reality, our careers are our lives and our children are part of our lives and they come with us and it's, how was your day, honey? How did that scene go? Did you make the pediatrician appointment? I mean, it's the same as any other married couple, it's just that we have slightly sort of exotic jobs.
Next question.
Hi, Anna.
Hi.
Hi. Looking forward to watching the show. You mentioned that the character is very dark and there's a lot of psychological layers to the character.
Mm-hmm.
As an actor, was there anything specific you did to prepare for the role?
Yes, have a very strange and twisted life. I'm slightly kidding, but not really. Honestly, there was a lot of. I think everyone has a lot of things in their past that are dark or troublesome or painful, and that goes for people with really glamorous jobs too. So the specifics obviously are not the same, but I didn't have such a hard time jumping into Annie's slightly crazy boots.
I have time for one more.
You mentioned that you worked with some really great directors early in your career. You mentioned Jane Campion, also Steven Spielberg, and Franco Zeffirelli.
Yeah.
Turns 95 next month.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I wanted to know.
Make sure you call him.
Yeah. I wanted to know, what did you gain about acting and being on a film set that early in your career? And also, could you give us a little taste of what it was like working with Martin Scorsese on The Irishman, which has all the great.
Well,
De
I
Niro.
mean, as far as sort of what I learned from all those people I worked with when I was really young, it's kind of hard to pinpoint. It was just more being sort of guided by the best possible people to be guiding you. And I don't know it any other way. So in some ways, I'm kind of really spoiled. And I don't know. I think you can either watch by studying something or watch by doing an apprenticeship, and I did an apprenticeship. As far as the Scorsese of it all, we're still shooting. It's the coolest job ever. I mean, no, literally, it is the coolest job ever. It's
Pacino, De Niro,
Yeah.
Pesci.
Harvey.
Harvey's in it?
Harvey Keitel's in it, yeah.
I didn't know that Harvey was in it.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I mean, everyone's in it. And it's, I'm also not only a huge Scorsese fan and obviously all of those living legends, but I also happen to be really into that genre, and so I love his gangster movies. So this is okay, check that off the bucket list of things I thought was never
yeah.
going to happen.
I can't imagine that feeling.
No, it's amazing.
How in it are you? Are you a
Look,
fairly
it's not
big
a
part in it?
it's not a huge part, but it's the wives and children and daughters don't have as much to do in the gangster movies, if you know what I'm saying.
No, I got you.
Because most of the action happens with the boys and the stuff that the boys do to other boys. Right. So, and I don't mean that in a weird way. I mean that in the people killing people way.
Well, Rocco got some good scenes in Goodfellas, obviously.
Yeah, but just in general.
Yes. No, I got you.
And also this particular story centers around real events, and a lot of the major players were men. So, but it's a pretty cool wives and daughters table to be sitting at.
Yeah, that's so cool. Congrats, I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
Me too.
What is it like working with Scorsese, if you don't mind me asking?
He is kind and gentle and, very approachable, and obviously I think knows that people are probably going to be intimidated, and therefore very, I don't know what the word is, but like sort of, he talks to everybody. Do you know what I mean? He talks to everybody exactly the same. There's no kind of like, oh, I only speak to certain actors or certain, you know what I mean? It's that thing of putting everybody at ease by making everybody feel like they're connected to it.
And he really enjoys actors too.
Yeah, and it's kind. Do you know what I mean? Like it's no one. There's directors that are sort of big and scary that for some reason think that like freaking people out is going to somehow get a performance. Well, it doesn't. It just gets you like frightened, frozen people. So, you know, that thing of making everyone kind of feel, even if you have a very small part or in a very tiny thing, that all of the details matter to him. And he's, I mean, just, he's a living legend. And it's just been one of those ones where I'm like, oh, thank God. It like, you know, lived up to everything that you would hope it would be.
How many of the legend auteurs do you have on your list now? Like at least 6, 7, 8 of them?
Spike Lee, Cameron Crowe, Gus Van Sant, Franco Zeffirelli, Campion, Scorsese, Spielberg, technically, Lonergan. Although it was only one day on Amistad, so I'm not sure if that really counts. But technically, I mean,
you shook his hand.
Well, I hung out and played like the teenage Spanish queen of whatever, and wore some very fancy dresses.
8?
I feel like, I don't know, am I missing somebody? No, Baumbach. I've been really spoiled. What can I say?
Are you spoiled or do you just have good taste?
I'm spoiled because I've also had the good fortune of being the correct age or type of actor for those kinds of roles at the time that those things were being cast.
Oh, wow, so you see it as a fair amount of luck as well?
Well, I think, well, that is, you know, it's not like if you say go to, I don't know, medical school and become an excellent surgeon, there will be a hospital that needs an expert in your field all the time. You don't necessarily, like creative niche filling is quite subjective and quite arbitrary in a lot of ways. So being kind of the right person at the right moment for the right thing is a little more sort of down to things that are a bit ephemeral. So yeah, I would consider luck to play a pretty major part in that.
I would add talent to it. You're a very talented actress.
Thank you very much.
I know you can't say that about yourself, but I think we can all say that for you.
Well, no, because I don't think that, because that would mean like, I don't know, I'm from New Zealand. We don't do self compliments. Sorry.
Nobody good can do self compliments. It's not a good thing to do.
I'm a little allergic to compliments, but thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Bellevue is a wonderful show. It premieres on
so
WGN.
much.
When does it premiere?
January 23rd on WGN.
Absolutely. Anna Paquin, everybody. Let's hear it.
Thank you.